I didn't find out all at once. Truth rarely arrives loudly. It seeps in quietly like water through cracks you didn't know existed, until one day the entire foundation collapses. For 5 years, I believed I had a good marriage. Not a dramatic movie-style love story, but a steady one. Safe, comfortable, built on trust. Or at least that's what I told myself whenever something felt slightly off. My husband, Arav, was charming in a quiet way. He wasn't overly romantic, but he was attentive when it mattered. He remembered birthdays, showed up to family events, and never raised his voice. People liked him. My parents adored him. Friends often told me how lucky I was to have found someone so grounded. I believed them. We met when I was already doing well for myself. I had inherited part of my family's business and grown it aggressively in my late 20s. Financial independence had always been important to me, not because I wanted luxury, but because I never wanted to feel trapped. Arav knew this from the beginning. He admired my drive, or so I thought. He told me he was proud of me. He never acted threatened by my success, which felt refreshing after years of subtle insecurity from men I had dated before him. When we married, we agreed on what felt like a partnership. Shared responsibilities, shared home, shared future. But looking back now, the signs were always there. He never pushed to contribute financially. At first it made sense, he was figuring things out. Then it became temporary setbacks, then bad timing, then excuses dressed up as plans. I paid for the house, I paid for the vacations, I paid for the emergencies. He always promised he'd make it up to me someday. And I believed him. Because love, when you're inside it, makes you generous to a fault. The first crack appeared in the smallest way. One evening while organizing documents for tax season, I noticed something odd, a transfer I didn't remember authorizing. Not large enough to panic, but enough to question. When I asked him casually, he smiled and said, "Oh, that? Just moved it around to manage some expenses. I told you I'd handle the finances this month." He hadn't told me, but I brushed it off. Marriage requires trust, I told myself. Then there were more moments. He became strangely interested in my assets, asked questions about inheritance timelines, wanted to know what would happen if something ever happened to my parents. He framed it as planning. I framed it as concern. The truth was something else entirely. The real moment, the one that shattered everything, came on a night I wasn't supposed to hear anything at all. I had come home early from a work trip, exhausted, jet-lagged. My flight had been rescheduled, and I didn't bother telling him. I wanted to surprise him. Instead, I surprised myself. His voice drifted from the study. He was on the phone, laughing. "You don't understand," he said. 5 years of patience. Do you know how much she's worth now?" I froze. I stood there, keys still in my hand, heart pounding so loudly I was afraid he'd hear it. "She trusts me completely," he continued. "Everything's joint. It's just a matter of timing." Timing. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on the floor, my back against the wall, listening to my marriage unravel word by word. "She thinks I married her for love," he scoffed softly. "Love is overrated. Security isn't." I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body felt numb, like it was protecting me from something too big to process all at once. When the call ended, I slipped out of the house quietly and drove for hours without knowing where I was going. 5 years. Every memory replayed itself differently now. Every gesture felt rewritten. Every "I love you" felt like a transaction I hadn't known I was paying for. By the time the sun rose, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. The man I had shared my life with didn't love me. He invested in me. And I was about to decide what that realization would cost him. Shock doesn't last forever. It hardens. The morning after I heard that phone call, I moved through the house like a guest in my own life. Arav noticed nothing. He kissed my cheek, asked about my trip, complained about traffic. The normalcy of it all made me nauseous. I smiled. That was my first lesson. The most dangerous thing I could do was let him think nothing had changed. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse. I didn't cry. Instead, I started paying attention. I reviewed bank statements with a precision I'd never needed before. I checked joint accounts, investment portfolios, property documents. The numbers told a story I hadn't wanted to see. Small withdrawals, strategic transfers, funds quietly rerouted into accounts under his control, always just subtle enough to avoid suspicion. He had been careful, but he had underestimated me. I contacted my lawyer under the guise of updating estate planning. No alarms, no drama, just questions, hypotheticals. What happens if a spouse is proven to have married under false pretenses? How do courts view financial manipulation within marriage? What protections exist if assets were acquired before the union? Each answer was a brick placed carefully back into the foundation of my life. At home, Arav grew more confident, comfortable. His patience, apparently, was nearing its end. He started pushing. "Maybe it's time we invest in something bigger," he suggested one evening. "A joint venture, with most of the capital coming from you, of course. I'd manage it." I looked at him across the dinner table, studying his face like a stranger. "And the risk?" I asked. He smiled. "Minimal. I wouldn't let anything happen to us." Us. The word felt obscene. I nodded. "Let me think about it." That was when his mask began to slip. He became irritable when I delayed, dismissive when I asked questions, cold when I didn't immediately agree. For the first time in 5 years, I saw flashes of entitlement where affection used to be, and with every crack, my devastation shifted. It didn't disappear. It evolved. Late at night, alone, I mourned the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the version of myself who had believed loyalty was mutual. I replayed moments I had once cherished and felt them rot in my hands. But during the day, I became methodical. I separated finances slowly, legally, opened new accounts, redirected income streams, adjusted ownership structures, all without raising suspicion, because I had always been the one good with money. He trusted that. He had always trusted my competence. The irony wasn't lost on me. The moment that changed everything came when I found his old email account, still logged in on a shared device. Years of messages, conversations with friends, jokes about playing the long game, comments about how love was a luxury for people without ambition. And then there it was, a message from before we married. She's perfect, rich, lonely, ideal. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. That sentence didn't just break my heart. It erased it. By the time I closed the laptop, something inside me had gone quiet, not numb, resolved. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to end this marriage in a way that ensured he walked away with exactly what he deserved. Nothing. People think confrontation is loud. They imagine shouting matches, tears, slammed doors, dramatic ultimatums. That's what movies teach us. That's what people expect. What they don't talk about is the kind of confrontation that happens quietly, when one person already knows the truth, and the other still thinks they're winning. That kind of confrontation is far more dangerous. I chose a night that felt ordinary. Dinner was simple, music low, the house calm. Arav seemed relaxed, confident even. That confidence told me everything I needed to know. He thought I was still the same woman he had married, the one who trusted blindly, the one who believed love protected her from being used. After we ate, I poured us both a drink. He raised his glass. To us, he said, 5 years strong. I met his eyes. Do you ever think about why we got married? He laughed lightly. What kind of question is that? A serious one, I replied. Why me? The pause was brief, but it existed. Because I loved you, he said smoothly. I nodded. And everything that came with me? His smile tightened. That too. Marriage is a partnership. That was his mistake. I leaned back. So if the money disappeared tomorrow, what would remain? He frowned. Why would you say that? I'm asking, I said calmly, hypothetically. He shifted in his seat. I don't like hypotheticals suggest instability. There it was. Not concern, not reassurance, fear. I let it drop. That night, he slept easily. I didn't. Instead, I finalized everything. The next weeks unfolded like a chess match he didn't realize he was losing. I presented him with a prenuptial update for tax efficiency. I documented his financial requests. I let him overreach, and he did. One afternoon, he asked me to sign a document he claimed was related to an investment opportunity. He rushed me, pressured me, told me it was time sensitive. I read every line and smiled. This gives you control over my personal accounts, I said. He froze. Oh, that. It's standard. My advisor insisted. I handed it back. Then have your advisor sign it. His composure cracked for the first time. You don't trust me? He snapped. I tilted my head. Do you trust me? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. The final straw came when he tried to manipulate emotion instead of logic. You've changed, he said one night, voice heavy with accusation. You're cold, distant, ever since that trip. I met his gaze steadily. People change when they realize the truth. He scoffed. About what? I stood up. About who they married. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, probably to deny, deflect, minimize, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said softly. Not yet. That word, yet, unsettled him more than any accusation could have. From that moment on, he watched me, carefully, suspiciously, but it was already too late. Because the balance had tipped, and he had no idea how close he was to losing everything he thought he had secured. The day everything came to the surface wasn't dramatic at first. There was no screaming, no shattered glass, no neighbors whispering behind curtains. It began with a folder. A simple, thin folder I placed on the dining table between us on a Sunday morning. Arav was halfway through his coffee when he noticed it. What's that? He asked casually. Something we need to talk about, I said. That tone, steady, calm, unflinching, made him sit up straighter. I didn't rush. I opened the folder slowly and slid the first page toward him. Bank statements. Highlighted, dates circled, amounts annotated. His eyes scanned the page, and I watched the exact moment recognition turned into panic. You went through my things? He snapped, trying to regain control through offense. I went through our finances, I corrected. Which you've been moving around without telling me. He laughed sharply. You're being paranoid. I placed the next page down. Email transcripts. Printed. Time-stamped. One particular line was underlined. She's perfect. Rich. Lonely. Ideal. The sound he made then wasn't anger. It was fear. You invaded my privacy, he said weakly. You invaded my life, I replied. For 5 years. Silence filled the room like pressure building before a storm. You're taking things out of context, or he said finally, people exaggerate, joke. Then explain the transfers, I said. Explain the timing. Explain why you've been pushing for joint ventures, where all the capital is mine and all the control is yours. He stood up abruptly. You wouldn't have what you have without me supporting you. That was when I knew he had nothing left. Supporting me? I repeated quietly. You mean spending what I earned? Living in what I paid for? Planning your future on my balance sheet? His face twisted. I stayed. I committed. That counts for something. No, I said. It was an investment to you and you expected returns. He tried a different approach then, one I recognized instantly. Victimhood. You think I didn't love you at all? He asked, voice cracking. I grew to love you. Isn't that enough? I felt something strange in that moment. Pity, but not forgiveness. You don't get credit for developing feelings after securing benefits, I said. Love isn't something you grow into once the paperwork is signed. His anger flared. So what? You're going to destroy me now? I shook my head. No, I'm just done protecting you from consequences. That night, he packed a bag. Not because I asked him to, because for the first time, he realized I was no longer the woman he could manipulate. The next weeks were ugly. He told people his version of the story, that I had become obsessed with money, that I was cold, that I cared more about assets than affection. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to, because the truth has a way of surviving without witnesses. Legal proceedings followed, quiet, efficient, devastating for him. The court didn't care about his intentions. It cared about evidence. And I had plenty. He walked away with what the law required. Nothing more. As he signed the final papers, he looked at me once, really looked at me. I never thought you'd do this, he said. I met his gaze evenly. You never thought I'd find out, and that was the difference. After the divorce was finalized, the house felt impossibly large and empty. Every corner held memories of a life I thought I had built with love. Every wall echoed with the lies I had been living in. But I didn't cry. Not this time. Not because I had grown cold, but because I had grown strong. I realized devastation isn't the end. It's a kind of pressure that reshapes you. Just like carbon becomes diamond under extreme conditions, betrayal and heartbreak had created a version of me that was sharper, clearer, and unbreakable. The first weeks after moving out were strange. I had no routine tied to him, no need to hide my anger, and no fear of manipulation. I took long walks, started journaling every night, and spent hours with my work. It wasn't just a distraction. It was reclamation. I was taking back every hour of my life that had been spent doubting myself, wondering if I was too naive, too trusting, too foolish to deserve love that was real. Slowly, I rebuilt. Financially, emotionally, spiritually. I invested more wisely than I ever had, using what I knew he coveted to make my life better, not anyone else's. I traveled. I enrolled in courses I had always dreamed about. I nurtured friendships that had withstood distance and time. Every choice was deliberate, every move calculated, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Word spread quietly. People I had once considered colleagues began noticing my rise. Projects I had led alone were being recognized publicly. Offers came in from companies I had only dreamed of joining. Every success was a silent statement. My life didn't need him to be valid. And he? I heard about him occasionally, through mutual contacts or the occasional news of failed ventures. The man who had once thought he could manipulate love into a business transaction was struggling. Investments collapsed, plans fell apart, and the charm that had won my trust so easily was no longer enough to protect him from reality. One evening, a mutual acquaintance casually mentioned, "Arav keeps asking about you." I smiled softly, sipping my tea. Let him. He'll never understand what he lost. Because it wasn't about money. It was about everything he could never see. Integrity, strength, resilience, and the kind of love that cannot be bought, borrowed, or manipulated. Months turned into a year, and I found myself sitting in my new apartment overlooking the city lights. The skyline shimmered, alive and moving, just like me. I had loved, been deceived, mourned, and risen again. And the lesson was crystal clear. Devastation is not permanent. Betrayal does not define you. Sometimes, the greatest heartbreaks give birth to the life you were always meant to live. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't empty. I was free. And in freedom, I found something better than revenge or reconciliation. I found myself.